That pretty much covered everything that I was going to say. One thing I will add is I haven't seen the, I say it was the caveat, I haven't seen the version of the Freedom Act that was passed, but originally one of the safety measures they claimed to have was that they would have the private companies storing the data and the NSA would have to go through with it and go through them to get it. I don't know if that's still preserved in there. I believe it is. And if it is, the main change...
Retroactive immunity and proactive immunity, the thing is a moot point.
Yeah, but I was just going to... But there is something very important to point out about this, is that one of the major changes would be that the private company could now profit more from collecting and selling your data. A lot of, for instance, Sprint, we know for sure, has what's called a law enforcement portal. If you're a law enforcement agency, you can actually log into their portal, request information on a customer, and it automatically charges the department that made the request. So if these companies are storing your data, the NSA most likely will have access to a similar portal. And they will just be automatically charged when they come to pull information, and therefore these large companies now are incentivized to collect and store your data, and they get a nice piece of the profit.
Thanks. I really don't know I haven't seen it yet, but effectively what that means to me, now if I were sitting in NSA looking at the designs of systems worldwide, I'd say, okay, instead of making one query into a central base, I'm making a distributed query. Okay. That's all that it does. Right? It makes it a distributed query. In fact, the system we set up were based on distributed queries because we had many storage sites around the world. So it didn't make any difference. So effectively, there won't be any change until we do a very simple thing. We insert into some law somewhere, I don't know how some Senate can start this, that says no intelligence community agency is permitted to have any U.S. data in their databases unless they have a warrant conforming to the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution that states the name of the individual and the probable cause as to why you're collecting that data. Otherwise, you are required to purge your database of that information. Now, if they did that, it wouldn't matter what source of power they thought they had under Executive Order 12333 or any other order to do it. They would have to purge that database or they're in violation of federal law and they go to jail. And we'd have to put them in jail. You can't just say you're going to do it and not put them in jail. You have to make an example. Otherwise, there's no enforcement behind that law. But that's the way to stop all this crap. I mean, put a law in that says if you have this data in your base, you're violating the law and you're going to go to jail unless you purge it.
All right, I do have one that came in on my phone from a personal friend that is a congressman. He asked me to stay. He asked me to keep his name quiet, but he wants to know. The NSA will probably know. But it's to explain what the treasure map is. And then I took a couple notes saying what and when, and what are the limits and the timeline on such a thing as the treasure map. And I'm going to go from left to right this time. Well, actually, I'm just going to put this towards Bill because he probably knows about it, and then we're going to go over here from there.
My understanding is that Treasure Map is a fairly recent program before 2013, of course, and that they were only capable of doing a few tens of millions of people simultaneously now, at that time. So given the rate of progress, you would expect that they should be at several hundred million, maybe a billion by now, and their objective is 4 billion. And it's really a pretty simple thing. It's a matter of indexing data against attributes of devices, which then map to people. And so you can then compile and index all of the GPS from your cell phones or any location from cell towers or positions in the net that you access points. Things like that, you can all index that just to the attributes of the device, which in turn maps to the person. Okay, and if you accumulate that over time, then I can say from this time to this time, map out where this person has been. Right, In fact, I can look at it and say, okay, this person is in this room at this time. Give me everybody else in this room. So then I draw a little radius of maybe 100, 200 feet and say, give me the location, anybody in this location in this GPS database. Plus, the other aspect of it that I saw anyway was that you can use then the location of everybody, these 4 billion people in the world, to start to make things like face recognition workable. The way you do that is very simply saying, okay, I know you're at this location at this time, here, this, and here, this, and here, and how many of those locations do we have video at that time? So then if I pull out, say, 3 locations with video, then I would say within, you know, a couple of feet at this point, that's where you are in all these videos. What face is in common in all those videos at that time? Because if you try to use face recognition, like for example, they try to recognize my face in the city of Minneapolis. How many people live in Minneapolis? Right? You know, however many that is, 1 million maybe? 3 million? Okay, if I try to recognize my face out of 3 million, the algorithm will say there's a certain probability of this match being correct. And so it'll come up with maybe 5 to 10,000 matches potentially, with probabilities ranging fairly closely of matching. Well, if I can you know, reduce that down to a few feet, then the reliability of face matching becomes very positive and very reliable. Then I then have your face and I put it in as your ID, and that maps then to you and that device. So then I can use that as facial recognition anywhere in the world. So that's another benefit from doing that kind of thing. I'm sure that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Perfect. Here's the next question. We're going to go from right to left here. It's, is Edward Snowden a criminal? Seems very upfront here.
No, he's not a criminal. He's he should be a hero to the American people. We have of checks and balances, and one of those checks is the free press. What's supposed to be a free press, and as we know, pretty much the press has gone along with everything these days. And you know, the only way you're going to hear any real information is find a website that carries something about Bill Binney or a few other people. So the last line of defense, constitutional defense, I would say, is whistleblowers, and that's why we passed whistleblower protection laws, and you know that we don't support or don't enforce. So no, Snowden, and the same with Chelsea Manning, they came across information of illegality by our government, and they revealed it. And here's the thing: so many people, knee-jerk reaction was, well, they told the enemies this and that. For example, in the case of Manning, and then somebody too about the Abu Ghraib prison. Well, guess what? The enemy has all this information already. They've got anecdotal information. They knew what was going on in Abu Ghraib. The only people in the world who didn't was the American people. And the point was, what Abu Ghraib was doing, it was acting as a combat multiplier for the insurgents. It wasn't helping us, it was helping the other side. And that goes to the whole problem with centralizing these decision-making authorities in such a narrow body of people, because typically the military is taught to think very narrowly. The CIA has picked up on that, and they don't have a very expansive way of thinking. So they, you know, so they can only think, well, charge that hill and take it. You know, they don't think of the consequences after. What's on the other side of the hill? You know, is there an ambush? All these other things. What's going to be the effect on the people? And that's exactly what happened to Abu Ghraib. So we by getting that information, we were able to stop those things taking place there, and actually to elevate ourselves a bit, you know, in spite of all the harm. Whereas if we had continued on without getting that information and never fixing those problems, it would have just given more and more of an incitement to the insurgents, costing more and more American lives. So we should be thanking these people for saving American lives and not condemning them like the government likes to do.
Is Edward Snowden a criminal? That's about as much of a trick question as I could hope to hear today, because I can't think of any definition of which he would be considered a criminal except under the United States government's own laws. To look at what he did, we often, bring up the fact that he blew the whistle and showed us what the NSA was doing in spite of the law, but he also did something else. He showed us just how poor the general security of our infrastructure is. So not only did he tell us what the government was doing, he protected us from foreign enemies. Consider China or Russia. If they wanted to exploit a network here, it was much easier to do before Snowden made his leaks, because we weren't focused on security as much then. So by what he did, he has not only helped promote democracy and freedom by informing us what the government is doing, he's also protected our infrastructure from foreign attack. And as far as I know, from my understanding, that is the NSA's job, they say. So I think he was just doing his job.
I have a couple stories I need to tell you, just because you'll get a kick out of them. But I answered that same question on the USA Today on TV, I don't know, early last year. They asked me about what I thought should happen to Edward Snowden. And I said, well, I thought he should be indicted for stealing government property. That's true. But I said also, I believe that the law should be applied equally to everybody. And that it should be executed in chronological sequence of the crime. Therefore, we have to start with indicting George Bush, Dick Cheney, Hayden Tennant, all the members of the FISA court, all the members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committee, all the attorney generals since 2001, and that's the Bush administration, okay? And you do the same people for covering up in the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, and then you go to the Obama administration and try the same people for the same kinds of crimes, then you do Edward Snowden. Okay? I mean, he did steal material, but all these other people have committed treason. They're the ones who committed treason. They're subverting the entire Constitution of the United States. That's treason. That's against the founding principles of this government. Right? And the other story I wanted to tell you, which I thought you'd like, has to do with security and networks. In 1991 and 92, somewhere in there, Dr. John Taggart and I proposed that within NSA, we put together a means of monitoring the entire worldwide network of NSA. And everybody on it and what they did as they did. Well, we'd be maybe 50 milliseconds behind, but we would be able to recognize who was doing what, where, and when across the entire worldwide network. And we lasted a month and a half with that suggestion. We ended up with two groups opposing it. One were the analysts. They said, you mean you're going to watch me? I don't want you watching me. I'll do my job, you do yours. He's the NSA analyst watching everybody else. I thought that was funny. Anyway, then the other group opposing us were the managers of NSA. I mean, they said, you mean to tell me you could see where I move money from and to? Yeah. You mean you could see what programs are succeeding and which ones aren't? Yeah. You mean you tell me return on investment? Yes. You mean Congress can look at that? Yes. You're not going to do that. Okay? I killed it right there. So we lasted a month and a half. But that's because that meant they had no oversight whatsoever of their network and who did what on it. And that's why Snowden could do exactly what he did.
Say, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to ask a Bill, just that, I don't know how many people have really heard Bill's story and the other people that he worked with and how he came to notoriety. Could you just give us some background, perhaps?
Okay, well, when they started spying on everybody in the United States, that was the biggest crime that I ever encountered in my life, and I was going to oppose that with everything I had. That happened in October of 2001. The second week in October of 2001. Because the programs I'd been developing were dealing with mass data, and we had filters up front so that nobody's data got collected unless they were relevant targets, and we knew it was a focused attack on data to pull out data about people who were doing bad things like terrorists and dope smugglers and things like that. People who were targets, known targets, and with probable cause. And or anybody associated with them or in near proximity of a social network with them, or other kinds of rules we were preparing to implement, like if you used a cell phone in Afghanistan or in the mountains of Afghanistan or in Inmarsat or things like that, satellite phones in that area, we are going to look at you because of a high probability you're a terrorist, okay? Or the similar kind of thing, if you're in the jungle of Colombia and you're using a satellite phone or cell phone and, you know, and we pick you up, we're going to look at you because it's a likelihood that you're either a member of the FARC or a dope dealer. So those were reasons to do, and that I called a professional disciplined approach, using rules and knowledge about the targets pull out of the massive amounts of data. And what that did was that made content a manageable problem for the analysts. It was even a problem in the 90s because even when they couldn't do this bulk acquisition, they still had too much data. Their analysts were failing because they couldn't get through that data. And so that was the reason we did that design, that focused professional attack on the network to make content a manageable problem so they can succeed in solving problems and being able to find terrorist threats before they occur. So we can actually stop them and succeed, much like Anonymous did in Texas, okay? And that was, but what we had to do was be able to look into everything flowing through the network. That meant we had to be able to look at fiber optic rates and see everything in it, and be able to look at least the metadata. Because if you had to start to look at the data itself, you were doomed to failure because there was just too much of it, you couldn't get through it. You couldn't keep up with the fiber rates. But if you looked at the metadata, you could see the relationships and look at the relationships and use that as the rule to pull out data, and that's how we did it. But in the end, what they decided to do was say, I want everything, so I'm cutting, I can see everything, so now I can capture it too, because we gave them that capability too. We shouldn't have done that, but we did. And so they turned off that filter up front and took in everything. And then they also got rid of all the protections because under the rules that we were guiding, we were trying to conform to the Fourth Amendment. If anybody that came in was a U.S. citizen, we would encrypt all their attributes. In other words, if they were talking to a bad guy, we would encrypt their attributes until we could show probable cause. And when we could show probable cause, then we could target them. That's according to the Fourth Amendment and according to the FISA law, too. So we were trying to conform to all that. Instead, what they did was remove all those protections, not concealing anybody's identity, and so now they were just violating everything. So that started to happen in the second week of October of 2001. And they had to use the programs we put together to do that because none of the other programs they had anywhere in NSA actually dealt with massive amounts of data like ours did. So I'm kind of semi-responsible for giving them the capability to do what they're doing today. So that's why I'm fighting for it. I have been since 2001. When I started to come out, first thing I did was go to the House Intelligence Committee, the people I knew there. They're supposed to do the oversight of NSA and stuff. They were formed as a committee, so was the Senate, and the FISA court was formed to prevent the intelligence community from spying on U.S. citizens. That came out of the church committees investigations. And by the way, one of the main people they were spying on in the church committee during that church committee period was Senator Church. I mean, because NSA and the Minaret program was watching them, so was the FBI and the COINTEL and CIA and Chaos. They were watching him to try to figure out what he was planning to do in his investigation. Well, they're still doing the same thing today, but according to Russ Tice, he's seen the transcripts of people from the FISA court, people from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, people from the Supreme Court, judges, generals, on the anybody 3-star general and above, I think they were watching. So, and all House and Senate members. So they were doing transcripts and still are much like a Minaret program, or under J. Edgar Hoover, right? We had that kind of activity going on with the FBI. So it's the same thing. I mean, just it's on a grander scale. Instead of doing a few thousand people, we're doing everybody. So that program was one we were inventing then, and when they started using it against everybody, we had to leave, and we went to the different committees. We filed complaints even with the Department of Justice Inspector General, and went through various other members of Congress, and that was over a period of years. And then in 2007, they decided that we'd made too much of a nuisance of ourselves, and we needed to be stepped on. So they sent groups of 12 FBI agents to each of our homes simultaneously. Diane Rourke lived on the West Coast in Oregon, so she got raided at 6 o'clock in the morning, and Kirk Wiebe, I and Ed Loomis and I live on the East Coast, and we got raided at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's so we were simultaneously, nobody can call each other. See, I'm getting raided, you know, you can't alert your friends, okay? So that's the way they did that. So they came busting into my house with guns drawn. So they were pointing guns at my son, pushed him out of the way, and then came upstairs to where my wife was getting dressed. They pointed guns at her, and they came in the bathroom where I was getting out of the shower and pointed a gun at me. So, of course, I didn't understand why they were doing it, but because I'd been cooperating with them for about 3 months, they were asking me all kinds of questions. I was telling them everything I knew about who's involved in Thin Thread, because they were looking at the New York Times. The principal was looking at the New York Times expose of the warrantless wiretapping program in 16 December of 2005, I believe that was. That was Jim Risen, whom I know now too, and Eric Lichtblau, whom I also know. So they did their Pulitzer Prize-winning article, I think it was. So. And they used that as a basis to raid us. But it was really the DOD-IG complaint that they were doing retribution against us. They also were afraid that we would go to the Senate Judiciary Committee, where Attorney General Gonzalez had just testified and not told the whole truth about the spying programs. They were afraid we were going to do that because we go to them and tell them, because we had a record, kind of a consistent record of going to committees and congressional people and telling them the truth, and they didn't want that out. So they wanted to threaten us with the FBI and guns and stuff like that. Well, it did me anyway. And I guess the point was that I started getting mad at them when they were there. Okay, because I knew why they were there. I mean, it wasn't too hard to figure out. These people were transparent. Okay, the only one who was cleared for all these programs was the special agent in charge, Paul Marek was his name, and he was the only one who was cleared for the Stellar Wind program. Which I called. I did my test when I first started meeting Helium Joyce. They called me in to talk to me about this program, people who knew about this program, and I said, oh, this was my test of them. That's were they cleared or not for this program. It was a test that I had to have. I had to know that they were cleared. They said they were, but that didn't mean anything. Okay. So I said, so when they said, do you know anybody who knows about this program and all that stuff? And I said, oh, you mean cosmic fart? And I waited for the reaction. Right? It took about 3 seconds or 4 seconds for this FBI agent to react. Well, then I knew he was cleared, okay, because the Stellar Wind program I referred to as cosmic fart. But he understood that. So that was my test of him. Okay. So, I mean, I had been cooperating for 3 months with them before this started, and then after the raid, when they were there, I said, so you guys were sent here by somebody outside the FBI. And by the physical reaction of all the agents, except of course the guy in charge, I could tell that I hit it right on the head. Because it's like you watch people see their reactions, like you caught the kids with their hand in a cookie jar, right? That's the kind of reaction you got from them. So I knew I hit it right on the head. And then they started telling me things like, questioning me, saying, tell me something that will implicate someone in a crime. Okay, so that means I'm supposed to determine what the crime was, right?
You shouldn't be here, is what.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Well, I got back at them. I'll finish this stuff. So after they said that, I said, well, I didn't really know anybody or anything that would implicate anybody in a crime. They said, I think you're lying. Well, that was the wrong thing to say to me, okay? When they said that, okay, I know what the crime is. George Bush, Dick Cheney, Hayden Tenet went through this conspiracy to subvert the entire Constitution. Here's how they did it. I went through the Stellar Wind program and what it did, what information they were taking in from what companies, and how they operated and manipulated and displayed it. And all the other agents in this that were sitting around there listening weren't cleared for this program.
Oh.
Okay, so they weren't cleared. I knew this. I'm causing him a problem. All this guy could do who was cleared is look at the floor while I was doing this. Okay, that's the only thing he could do. I'm reporting a crime to him, okay? They're under obligation to research and investigate that crime. But they were here to cover it up. That was the point that they were doing. So that's how I was telling the other agents what was happening and why they were there. Well, of course, the head agent can't let them disperse. I mean, if they go away and start talking about that, hey, you know what I heard today, you can't have them doing that. So he had to have a huddle outside with the cars. They couldn't go. He had to pull them all together and say, now you guys can't talk about anything you just heard. I know what he said. That's what he had to say. And then he said, you have to come see me tomorrow morning because you have to get cleared for a program. Once you're cleared for the program, you can't talk about it. So I informed them of what the program was, and they weren't cleared, so now they have to be cleared. So now they can't talk about it. So that was a problem I created for them. And from there, after the raid, they, over the period of a couple of years, through 2009, about 2.5 to almost 3 years, they 3 times attempted to indict us, all of us, the ones who were raided, on false charges. Well, each time I was catching them with I had exculpatory data, and each time they thought they had it, right? But we had friends and we shared things, so they have it too. So that when they took it and left with it, we asked for it back, and we got it back from our friends. So that's the best thing about sharing. You can never, it's like backup, or it's a backup system for your data. So then they did that, and then